Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. Sharon Kyle here. I'm having a conversation with Jay Ponte. Jay is a longtime grassroots political organizer and activist and a writer whose work focuses on movement building, economic justice, democratic participation, and climate change. And he's been involved in progressive organizing for decades. And recently, Jay and I have sort of bumped into each other a couple of times at different events. And we said, hey, let's do a conversation on the LA Progressive. So welcome, Jay, and thank you for joining me.
Always an honor to talk to you, Sharon. Yeah, it was the Cornell West event, and you created space for us to elevate our Stop the Camps mission, where we're trying to elevate the message to stop the rollout of Trump's internment camps, immigrant internment camps around the country, which is wild to say out loud and is getting very little coverage.
Absolutely. And since we saw each other last, there have been a series of events that had just, yesterday, or maybe it was the day before yesterday, when Renee Nicole Good was killed by an ICE officer in Minnesota. And today we learned that two Portland residents were also killed by ICE officers. There was also a young man here in Southern California who was shot by an off-duty ICE officer on New Year's Eve. And not much has been talked about. We ran a piece in the LA Progressive about that. But let's talk about, I was just realizing that we are almost at the 15th anniversary of Occupy. And you wrote a book, and I have started an article about that book and the tour that you guys are doing and how you're talking about organizing from the ground up and not just deifying individuals as, they are our saviors. Let's talk about the book, your tour, and, you just go ahead and just start talking and we'll just go on from there.
I know it feels like drinking from the fire hose, doesn't it?
Yes.
And thank you for all that. Yeah, I spent 7 years writing this book. It's called Be the Revolution: How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. And the movement part is important because most people don't know that the movement began well before the campaign, and it was Occupy organizers who launched a national movement to mobilize the Occupy network to enroll Bernie in running for president. And there was also a lateral campaign run by Tim Carpenter and the Progressive Democrats of America to push Bernie to run. So, that's a profoundly important piece of history because most people think that Occupy failed and Bernie just kind of came out of the free market because he appealed to unrealistic millennials. And the truth was that he was pushed to run, and the movement that was the real power behind the campaign that broke every fundraising record and completely shifted over. That was a strategic movement. And I think not a lot of people understand that because consumerism has so shaped our paradigm politically that it's so conditioned us that even our politics is consumerist. It's like we look at candidates, everyone's looking for someone to save us. And the frame of this campaign was important because Bernie was a tactic. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, when you say that, it takes me back to 15 years ago when Occupy, which started, of course, in Manhattan, in Zuccotti Park, but also, every major city in the United States, including Los Angeles, which is where we're located. And Los Angeles had the largest, geographically speaking. It took up a wide expanse of the land around City Hall. And Dick and Dick, my husband, who is the co-publisher of the LA Progressive, Dick, why don't you stick your head in here and say hi? He's not too far from me. Wherever I am, he's somewhere near. But anyway, Dick and I used to go down there. And when the decision was made to shut it down, there were people that yelled, oh, well, Occupy is a failure. But I knew that there was a definite change in the language which is extremely important. I mean, this business of the 1% versus the 99%, nobody was thinking or speaking along those lines. And I think we're still seeing reverberations of that right now.
Well, the premise of the book takes that one step further to suggest that there has been an unbroken lineage in this network of progressive movement building and leftist movement building that started. And it also creates a context that 9/11 in 2001 really obliterated quite a lot of the leftist energy. And it really created space for the third way Democrats and neoliberals to consolidate power and basically stamp out a lot of the sort of leftist resistance or progressive ideas. And Occupy was many watched Obama, who they thought was going to be a bastion of hope, watched Obama do all sorts of things like not only did the Wall Street banksters who tanked our economy, not only did they not go to jail, some of them got cabinet positions. We watched Obama militarize the police. We watched him expand the police state. We watched him bomb in 7 countries, export fracking all over the world. And, we knew that Secretary Clinton's candidacy would be an extenuation and an escalation of that. But it shows that there's an unbroken lineage, that the occupiers who so many people, it wasn't just a thing that happened. It was a place for dialogue. It was a place for people. It's where I was radicalized. And I use that in a positive way. I use the word radicalize because radical means to get to the root of the issues. You think radish is the Latin word, root, a root vegetable. Radical means root. So you're really, as a radical, getting to the root of the issue. So I don't mean that as a pejorative, but so many people had their eyes opened and got activated, and it went, into union movements and, fight for 15 and climate. And it just went in all these directions. And then when Sanders ran, that became a lightning rod for all of that to come together under one roof, and was such a powerful activation. But from these, you might call them convulsions, you see these stages, whether it's, Occupy and then Bernie 2016 or Black Lives Matter before that in 2014. You can definitely see the impact Occupy had on the BLM movement for sure. Not responsible for, but certainly, you can see some of the groundwork done. And then Bernie 2020, and then George Floyd. So with each one of these moments, these trigger moments, you see more and more people coming in, and we're seeing overwhelmingly the ideas triumph with candidates like Mamdani, right? So Mamdani wins on this platform. And I think that is a proof of the premise that the neoliberal leadership has failed. It has paved the way for Trump. It has enabled Trump and fascism. And it has apologized for fascism. It has enabled genocide. And these progressive leftist ideas are wildly popular and resonate with working class people across all demographics. And so I think we're just in this moment where we have to recognize Mamdani and the success of other candidates is proof that these ideas are the path forward for a sustainable democracy, which is very much in peril right now.
It absolutely is. And thank you so much for giving us the root to the word radical. The LA Progressive houses a glossary. So whenever I interview someone or we have a writer contribute an article that when I read it, I need to break out a thesaurus, I take those words and I put it in the LA Progressive glossary, which anybody can find at the top menu. So thank you for that. But back to what you were saying about the neoliberalism, which is in our glossary as well, because I don't make any assumptions that people reading this or watching this or listening to this understand every word we're talking about. And my goal and the goal of Dick and the LA Progressive mission is to explain, expand, and to get people to understand and take control of the reins of authority in their lives, which I don't believe we can have a democracy with capitalism the way it operates in the United States. So this neoliberalism, I often talk about the Powell Memo, 1971,
Mhm.
and how the Powell memo can be used as the beginnings of the neoliberalism, the launch of neoliberalism, which was a direct response to the victories of the 60s, the Voting Rights Act, and all of the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the anti-Vietnam movement. All of that led to a desire for the elite, the wealthy, to take control. And we're seeing it play out right now. So the work that you're doing, and I want to talk about this tour, these trainings. Do you talk about this? And also, I also want to thank you for including Black Lives Matter. And in your book, you talk about the role that race plays in dividing the country. Now, I don't know if you know much about what I talk about, but what I talk about a lot, and the reason I talk about it a lot, because I don't hear it a lot, is that we need to do what Fred Hampton of the
Yes.
we need a rainbow coalition, but we can't have one until we really understand how white supremacy is interwoven throughout our lives. So I appreciate that you put a focus on that. So talk about your training.
Yeah, so Fred Hampton is very central to the theory of change. I reference Fred Hampton in the book. There's an entire chapter that is focused on that in an autopsy of the California Poor People's Campaign, which also calls back to the original Poor People's Campaign launched by Dr. King. And, it was one of the first occupations. They occupied the National Mall for 3 months, 1,000 people in the National Mall in Washington with tents, and very underreported. And it's interesting because the moment that Dr. King sort of tried to hybrid the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement and also started talking about capitalism, that's the moment he was killed. Fred Hampton also murdered, assassinated in that same time. And for me, Fred Hampton, I'm a Fred Hampton acolyte, which is kind of wild because he's just 21 years old. But his Rainbow Coalition idea, I have very strongly throughout the book advocated that this model is crucial because not one of our separate movements, climate, economic justice, anti-war, health justice, none of us have the resources or numbers to really truly transform our society or defeat fascism, roll back the climate apocalypse. We don't have the resources, and we tend to be constantly siloed and working individually. And Fred Hampton understood by building these, and Jesse Jackson also, who was part of that, also that Poor People's Campaign. His rainbow, the Rainbow Coalition idea kept thriving, and I think that is crucial. And I also talk about an inside-outside strategy. So one of the things that leftist movements, and I think one of our takeaways from Occupy, some of us watched while we were getting our asses kicked and by jackboots. We watched the Tea Party, which was, of course, funded by the Koch brothers, get co-opted, but they went on to elect 84 people to Congress and redefined the Republican Party, which has continued to devolve into the state it is right now. But a lot of us understood that without occupying the structures of power and having those two facets of the movement work together. And if you look at a lot of the big times that we've actually won on policy, you have outside organizers, and this is exactly what the civil rights movement did. It's what unions do with collective bargaining. You have outside disruption, mobilization, protest, working with people fighting for policy change, and those two are working together strategically. That's really important. But of course, that base has to be big and beautiful and multicultural and pluralistic, because it is racism, white supremacy is in the drinking water.
That's right.
Like you cannot. One of the other premises in the book is that when I expand the concept of an inside-outside strategy to also talk about, yes, inside-outside organizing in an external material way, but inside-outside means as an individual, I must focus, must get out from behind the keyboard, because a lot of people think posting hot takes on social media is activism. And like at a certain point, you need to get out from behind the keyboard, or at least connect with other human beings in a real way. So that's externalizing your activism, but also doing the inner work, inside, outside, inner work to uncover the trauma that we have from white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, colonialism. All of these things are in the drinking water of our national consciousness, and you cannot have been brought up without internalizing these regressive paradigms. And as an activist, I have to identify that because I bring that with me into organizing spaces, right? So I have to identify that. It's not enough for me to just put a Black Lives Matter lawn sign up. I have to do actually active work around decolonization and around anti-racism. It's not just putting up a Black Lives Matter bumper sticker and
Absolutely,
saying,
absolutely.
yeah,
And that's so essential. And Jay, I'm so happy to hear that you are doing that kind of work, because all too often on the left, what really contributes to the division, the racial division, is that I'm just going to be frank. A lot of white people who are leftists don't seem to understand that it's been in our drinking water. White supremacy is in the drinking water. I don't care how progressive you are. And even Black people and other people of color, we need to decolonize our minds.
yes, that's right.
And that whole concept of decolonizing your mind, in my vision, it is essential that that be part of the lesson structure.
Yep. And I'm not suggesting, so that's some of the work we do in our trainings. I'm not suggesting that I am the greatest expert on all of these things, but we try to, it isn't, we do an individual and collective leadership training where we go into different local communities and we invite in, really everyone's welcome, but we're specifically reaching out to young organizers and the various groups for, again, economic, racial, health justice, climate justice, anti-war. And we're inviting us to create a space together. And it is very much about building solidarity and connection, but it's also about, it's a transformational leadership training. So it is about sort of going through processes that help us to lift the veil a little bit. And the exercises give you a little, for me anyways, these exercises were life-changing for me. And not only does it help me level up as an individual leader, like I can look to some of the big direct actions I pulled off and cite some of these exercises I've done in various trainings as having these aha moments where I go, oh yeah, or realizing like this sort of conditioning is inside of me, and to just first allow it to kind of be in my awareness, because white fragility behaves very much in the same way that addiction does. Like if you go to somebody anyone who's had, a family member or a friend who's suffered from addiction or alcoholism, what happens when you go and confront them about it?
Yeah, they're defensive.
They're defensive. It's the same thing. So if you look at the pathology of white supremacy and addiction, it behaves also like narcissism as well. Like these pathologies kind of have a similar manifestation. And so there's an instinctive like, no, like I'm not, I don't, but it's on an unconscious level. So part of the inner work, and again, this is hopefully just a conversation opener. I'm not suggesting we're selling any kind of cure or final, anything like that. But we hope that it's an experience that builds solidarity, shares some of these ideas, because also a lot of our organizing theories of change, we're constantly just reacting on the
Yes.
left. It's where, and there isn't a lot of thought put into a modern theory of change. And if you, in the book, really does show, it is a firsthand, account of our adventures from Occupy through to Bernie Sanders campaigns, giving you all of the blow by blow of the whole thing, right? But then there is also a chapter on QAnon and how that was organized. I was part of a loose network of people, citizen journalists, who were mapping who was behind QAnon, what were their tactics. And what happens is the fascist right and the authoritarians, they will learn from our innovations. They will learn from leftist innovations, and then they will apply them to build power. Whereas the left tends to not, I think, because we have a disdain for power, because it's been difficult for us to build power. So we define ourselves by fighting power, right? But if you define yourself by the fight, instead of actually focusing on building power, like for instance, like Mamdani has done, um, you end up fighting everybody, right? Because
Right. Even yourselves, we have these circular
we end
firing
up fighting it,
squads.
right? We end up fighting ourselves. And if anyone who's been involved in any kind of activism knows that we are rife with inner, and part of that is also we do have infiltrators. And like I say in the book, the right looks for converts and the left looks for traitors. Part of
Right.
that is because our movements have been infiltrated by COINTELPRO and by Pinkerton,
Yes.
and we have been infiltrated. That's true. So, and whereas the right kind of comes more from a theo-fascist Christian nationalist
Right.
paradigm where
Authoritarian,
they're trying to
hierarchical.
convert people. So,
Right. And I've heard of studies where they look at people who are more comfortable on the right than on the left and vice versa, and that there's a fundamental difference in the way that we are comfortable in structures. For example, the hierarchical nature, deeply hierarchical, deeply structured on tops down type of relationships. That is a right-oriented structure where it works well, and the power and the money is at the top, and the people that are on the right seem to be comfortable with that. Whereas on the left, we are completely not. We are completely grassroots. We are absolutely reject any form of authoritarianism.
yeah, much more anarchic. But I do want to at some point highlight this article that I'm collaborating with the LA Progressive on, because the import of this is reached a critical mass, I feel. So the whole premise of the book is we cannot we can no longer rely on the neoliberal democratic establishment. No one is coming to save us, unfortunately. And it is urgent because right now, I have been warning for months about the stages of fascism. 2 months ago, I put out I went on Blue Sky. I put out a message around centering into the fourth stage of fascism. And what we're seeing with this isn't happening in a vacuum, in my opinion. The Minneapolis, the Portland shootings, and plus think about how normalized we've already forgotten that this regime went into a sovereign nation, kidnapped a head of state and brazenly talk. They had some pretext about it being a narco state, which is ridiculous, but they didn't even bother to really, build up the pretext like they did
No,
with weapons of
not to
mass.
mention just shooting Venezuelans on the
Yes,
boat. 80,
that's
how
right.
many of them?
Mur
Just
extrajudicial murders, like they commit, but this is important. What's important is that they continue to do these things to see what they can get away with. Okay, the reason to push back is so important. And again, I'm honestly a little scared to even say this out loud because in this stage, this is designed to have a chilling effect. And with some of the legislation that has been passed, they're really putting an eye on targeting anyone who is anyone who is a dissenter. They're trying to create a frame of domestic terrorism, which is what they said about Renee Good,
right. That's right.
and they framed her as a terrorist. She's a legal observer, clearly trying to escape men in balaclavas. But if you look at these events, if you zoom out a little bit and you see, um, in the article, like according to Paxton's theory of 5 stages of fascism, um, fascism itself is entropic, which means that it's a scientific principle that if there is no energy to sustain something, it's going to collapse. It's a very crude way to say it, but fascism is the same way because fascism hollows out institutions and replaces them with loyalists, right? So the basic social structure in our institutions become hollowed out, and so it will either do one or two things or both. It has to become expansionist, like you see Hitler invaded Europe, right? Um, and or it has to become more and more radical and violent and escalating those threats and to keep us constantly in chaos. And those things are happening both in real time. So I believe, I don't think it's too far reaching to say that there are behind the scenes in DHS policies being made where these agents are being told that the gloves are off and that they will have the full support of the administration. And so we're seeing that manifesting with the brazen violence. And then also we have increased rhetoric around ground wars in Mexico, Colombia, Greenland, Cuba,
Yeah.
right? So this is clearly signaling we're moving into what you might call the fifth stage of fascism. If you read the article, we'll go through
Of course,
we'll
and
go
I'm
through
gonna
these stages, but
publish it. I'll publish it as when you send it. I've already written an article about your book, and this video that we're talking is going to be embedded in the article that I wrote. But I
cool.
want to encourage you to continue to communicate to the LA progressive community, because your voice, what you're talking about and what you're doing is extremely important, particularly at this time. Now, your book is going to be an audio book, I understand.
Yeah, we're going to be finally putting out the audiobook within a couple months. It's
Okay.
already recorded. We're just sort of putting on. It's already recorded. We're just putting on the final touches. So that's going to be coming out, and then in March we'll be going on tour, and we do these wonderful sort of lefty bookstore events and panel discussions and trainings. And we can't do. I mean, it's just
Well, the
I
LA
don't have a big.
Progressive would love to help sponsor those.
Oh,
So
we need
let's,
we need we need help because it's really just me in a van driving across country, going and just and organizing. There's no big organization. It's not going to like fund salaries. It's really just going to pay for gas and food.
so
And
Jay, what made you, what drives you?
oh, boy, I got to say that I had no plan to do any of this. I did get my start organizing, doing punk rock shows around the early 2000s. So that was my foray into community organizing. And it's honestly, it's just such a wonderful medicine to be out and helping to energize and work with your community. But Occupy really was my moment because there's a story in the book where the night Occupy was raided, I got hit with a baton by one of the riot cops, and that was the moment where I went, "Oh, the class war is real,"
It
right?
is.
And then it's just from that point, it's been a progression where and then also I was awakened as a climate activist in 2016 on the Bernie campaign, working with Josh Fox. I helped organize I did basically a lot of his grassroots organizing and I produced a lot of his rallies and did the launch of his HBO film, How to Let Go of the World and love all the things climate can't change. But that itself was an awakening for me. And I realized, oh my God, the human race is really at a moment where we are fighting for our survival. And I have been focusing on fighting fascism since I guess it would have been all throughout the first administration, but really, have put a lot of my focus into this. I helped launch a campaign to use the 14th Amendment to disqualify. The third article of the 14th Amendment disqualifies any elected official who has participated in or gives aid and comfort to an insurrection, which happened on January 6th. And so any MAGA elected who tweeted about it, gave aid and comfort to, supported it in any way is not allowed by the Constitution to hold office. And I've also was involved in Greg Palast's voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement campaign of mostly Black and brown voters for his Vigilantes Inc. Documentary. So the point is, I know this is a lot of words for, there is a climate apocalypse we must be addressing, but we can't because we have a neoliberal establishment first that has enabled fascism and has fought our reasonable attempts to build a healthy populist movement to fight for economic. We just want to have healthcare and be able to work and be able to afford our rent. It's not that mystical. It's not crazy. We're not crazy terrorists. We just want to be able to live, right?
Right. We just don't want this extreme weather and wildfires burning up our homes. And we want our kids to be able to go to school without getting shot. I mean, it's the normal stuff that they have in Europe. I mean, they're not worried. Their kids aren't like having drills to in case there's a shooter coming into their school, they don't have those kinds of drills in
That's
their
right.
elementary schools. Why do we have to have that?
Yeah. Well, we do because ultimately, the neoliberals, the third way Democrats, and the book does break this history down very, very in depth, because they decided that they got their asses kicked by Reagan in the 80s and decided if we can't beat him, we'll just join him. So they essentially are the Republicans of the 1980s and 90s, and so we've had to fight this battle on so many fronts where we're just trying to, Citizens United, for instance, has completely like the amount of dark money and corporate money in politics is it's seemingly insurmountable. And yet the book shows that we have fundamentally changed the world. So if not for Occupy and the Bernie Sanders movement, we would be as terrible as everything is now. It's hard to imagine that we would be living in an even different world without this. And in some ways, this is really a response to that, because with a fascist regime, how can we fight for climate? How can we fight for all of these things? So really, and as these climate catastrophes increase, like the widespread fires in LA, and it's really about extreme weather. It's not just about global warming. It's about Texas freezing, and it's disrupting the global climate. And so it is nothing but extreme weather. But this is going to more and more create more opportunities for strong men to take power. And ultimately, what it looks like is Mad Max Fury Road. That's kind of where, if you game it out long enough, that's where this heads. And we're seeing that happen in real time.
And thankfully, we're at a place where we can change that trajectory and not necessarily end up in the worst of all cases. So thank you, Jay Ponte, for doing what you're doing. We anticipate hearing more from you, and we'll continue to work together to make this world a better place.
Thank you so much. And folks can actually download a free, if you go to betherevolution.us, you can get more on the book, and people like Noam Chomsky and Dr. West and Ruffalo and Nina Turner have endorsed the book. But you can also download a free bonus chapter on why Trump won in 2016, which is still very relevant. And if you go to givebutter.com/Be the Revolution Tour, you can see what we're up to. We literally just launched that campaign, and I'm just so grateful for your support and everything you do. This is really such an important bastion of independent media and such a distinct voice in the national conversation. So I'm so grateful for everything you and Dick do, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Jay. And I'm going to put links down in the bottom to everything that you've just said. So thank you, Jay, and we hope to hear from you pretty soon. And especially to remind people that the book is going to be an audio book and the classes.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, Jay. Bye-bye. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.